Thank you, Chairman, and welcome our guest here today. And I suppose much of what I maybe wanted to ask has been asked already, Mr. Santini, and if it has, maybe you can find it out, because I was in and out at other appointments as well. But look, I suppose I come from a constituency that are, I suppose, quite a lot of agricultural activity, and farmers have been feeling the pinch in recent times. But to think that they're, the very produce that the dairy farmer needs, or the suckler farmer, or many more other type farmers need, is the manure to continue their practice, is now quadrupling in price, not double, maybe tripling. It's something that has many of them very, very, I wouldn't like to say angered, but upset and fearful of how they're going to survive. And many of them feel they're being squeezed by an existing government that's very anti many of the farm practices that are there at present. So they're under a severe amount of pressure. And you're saying that supply might be there later this year, or that could be up to what it should be. But what good is this if the farmer can't pay for the product? And that's where they're facing. That's the farmers that are talking to me. Are feeling the pinch and are worried about bills that are going to be in their local co-op. You've talked about the suspension of all tariffs, we'll say, on nitrogen, which would reduce, we'll say, the nitrogen prices in the EU by several tens of euros per tonne. I'd like to know exactly how much would that reduce the nitrogen for the farmer in this country, number one. And is this going to happen? Is it going to happen immediately? Because if it isn't going to happen, it'll be catastrophic for many of the farmers here. And maybe those with a different agenda would like to see a lot of farmers wiped out, might have a different agenda, might have a smile on their face that this is a backdoor way of destroying the agricultural way of working that many farmers that we know are working at the moment. Because, at the end of the day, if you can't pay for your product, it's the same as anything. If we're all buying something today for €100 and it's €500 in the space of less than 12 months, there's something gone wrong somewhere. And somewhere, surely be to God, in the political system, whether it be in Europe or this country, it needs to be rectified immediately before farmers will be facing the edge and facing many of them facing being wiped out. So I'd appreciate, Mr. Santini, where you might show some bit of green light. Shed some bit of green light on the future of Irish agriculture. It's probably a European issue, but I'm talking the Irish farmer at this present time that's squeezed to the limit and finds every day he puts on the radio station and turns on the television, it's anti-farming sentiments are going on out there, and nobody willing to help him or her that's trying to pay a bill at the end of a month in the local co-op. And if, Mr. Santini, you go off the airways today with no hope, how do you expect a politician like me to give hope to people that desperately need hope at this time? So I'd appreciate you might address this issue. You might address how this issue can be resolved immediately, or is it going to be resolved immediately? Or are they going to be left with the nightmare situation of probably, in many cases, and maybe I don't think a lot of politicians realise what's happening in rural Ireland. Farmers are losing their farms. Co-ops are taking over their farms because they can't pay the bill. And that's what it comes down to. They can't pay the bill. And there's a desperate situation here where a product to the farmer was coming at it wasn't cheap in the first place, but it's certainly the fact that it's quadrupled its price is putting a lot of them, and they're facing a very, very bleak future, many of them. So I'd appreciate, and I thank you for being here today, but I'd appreciate you might enlighten us as to is there any light at the end of the tunnel, basically.
Question for you, Mr. Santini.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not a politician, so of course I will have a bit of a technocratic answer, but I will try to adapt to the message, because your question is important, and even if being from an administrative service, our administration is here. Our client is the farmer. I mean, is the EU farmer. We are here to one of the 5 objectives of the treaty of this common agricultural policy is to have the reasonable farm income level and livelihood in rural areas. So that's a clear objective. There are others, and they are contradicting, of course, all of them. If you mention all of them, we also need to ensure food supply. We also need to ensure affordable prices for consumer. We also need to ensure increased productivity for the farming sector, and we also I don't remember the fifth one, but. The equation is complex, but clearly farm income and farm livelihood is something which is important, and it is in the objective of the common agricultural policy to have a farm income that's of course. I said it also in my opening statement. We are here in a situation where you have an increase of one cost of production of farmers, which is not the whole cost, but a significant one, with very high level of increase. You say multiple by 4, can be, even if it's only multiplied by 2, it's a very big increase, and that's something which is difficult to adapt to. I wouldn't say first that we're not doing anything. We have a policy which is in place since 60 years, the Common Agricultural Policy, and since 20 years with the format which is similar to the one we have, based on the big amounts of what we call decoupled direct payments that are here to give a buffer to the viability of income from one year to another. The viability of income, it can come from an increase of cost of production, but it can come, in the past, it also came from other elements. You all remember the 2015-16 crisis in the milk price. That's also something that normally the direct payments are here to buffer out. It's not the huge. I understand that it's not sufficient to make the light at the end of the tunnel, but we should not forget that this is in place. If you look at other similar economies like the US, for example, similar level of the volatility, the fluctuation of income for US farmers from one year to another, and I'm not talking of the big ones, I'm talking of all the US farmers, and you have a lot of small US farmers also. The volatility of income of these US farmers is far more acute than the volatility of income of EU farmers. Still, there is some volatility and it's difficult to absorb, and you're right to point out to this. So where is the light? In this case, we are depending on energy markets. The expectations of energy specialists, and I'm not an energy specialist, but I read their projections, is that there should be a moderation of these price trends on the energy markets in the coming year. Probably not to the point that we will return to at least for fertilizer price, to the level of before, of 2 or 3 years ago, but not to the point where we have now. There's a problem to go through this year. That's where I mentioned to you these different elements. So we have these direct payments that are there to make the buffer. We have the possibility and since 20 years, probably not taken enough, both by farmers and by member states into their mix of policies, to develop risk management tools, insurance. There's a tool which is called the income stabilization tool, which is, in fact, you can dedicate part of your rural development envelope to a mechanism that would compensate even further more than the direct payments does the fluctuation of income. In fact, this instrument has been implemented by 3 member states only, and despite all the incentives that we gave in the Commission to try to do it. In the new CAP strategic plans, there should be a specific section describing what is the risk management strategy. And I have not read what is written in Ireland, but I hope that this is taken seriously by all the farmers that are contributing to this CAP strategic plan, and by the government which is presenting this CAP strategic plan. What else? Then again, if this is not proving sufficient, there's always the possibility to try to trigger exceptional measures like we did for the COVID at the beginning. We did, you might remember in Ireland that we took a little measure when there was a lot of uncertainty related to Brexit. for the beef market. We took a little measure. These imply that there's a budget, and you might know that the budgetary framework of the EU is constrained by the member states. So if we need to find money in the EU budget, it's not an open-ended budget. We need also to find a way to reduce the expenses somewhere else. And that's always a tricky debate in this. There is a financial reserve that has been agreed by the co-legislator of 450 million euros that can be mobilized for these kind of elements, but we have to collectively decide where is the real need for these elements. And lastly, I also mentioned it, and some of you also mentioned it, there is a framework on state aids that allow each member state to target one or the other of the particular elements. This has been very actively implemented by the member states in the COVID situation. A lot of state aids mechanisms have been decided by the different member states with a very more relaxed approach from the Commission because of this particular situation. And we are still in this situation. This framework, this temporary framework for state aids is in place until June 2022. So we are covering the situation right now.